We continue our series of interviews with candidates for Boston City Council in the preliminary election on September 24th. Our guest is competing to succeed Mark Siomo as the councilor for Allston-Brighton's District 9. We'd like to welcome Jonathan Allen. Thank you very much for being with us, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lovett.
Jonathan, like many people in this district, you are a transplant, but in addition to that, you have an interesting story. You started preaching when you were 11 years old.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Yes, at 11 years old, I grew up to extraordinary grandmothers who both are ministers. And when I was a little boy, I would go to church with them every chance that I got. Sometimes that was 3-4 times a week. And got involved at a very early age with impacting my peers and thinking about how to form more community in my towns back in Louisiana and in Texas. And I always felt called to use my gift for connecting with people and inspiring people to live their best lives and overcome challenges that may come their way. And so that has been a part of my thread for a very long time.
Well, you took that to a next level by getting a degree in theology.
Yes.
And more recently, you went to law school. How does the law school take it from there?
Yeah, the law school takes it from there because certainly for me, this idea of faith and politics, that much of our politics and our policy decision making is influenced by both the institution of religion and certainly people's personal spiritualities. And so I've always been very interested in thinking about how we use our spiritualities both proactively to address injustices in the world as well as responsibly as so not to harm other people and to advance the missions of love and equity. And so law school for me was a way of finding out practically how do we understand the systems that govern us, that impact our everyday lives, and how do we then come up with solutions to creating innovative addresses to those problems as well.
There are a lot of people who come into Boston for education, and the neighborhoods don't leave a trace on them, but you're different. Allston-Brighton has shaped you. How? Yeah,
see, I'm originally from the South, as we said, and I came out in Allston-Brighton, so a very important time in my life, and me figuring out who I was in Allston-Brighton, and the community embraced me in so many different ways. I don't take for granted my neighbors, the people like Miss Jenny, who's over 70 years old, who knocks on my door every Tuesday evening and delivers groceries to my apartment, but not just mine, but other people in my apartment building. And the people at the Oak Square YMCA, who I do Zumba with on a weekly basis. Those are people who become family to me, even my colleagues at Boston University and Harvard and BC, students as well as professors who have shaped me in so many different ways. And it's informed certainly even my passion for giving back to this community through public office, public service.
One thing that makes you stand out from candidates is the priority that you mentioned, which is, I guess, overcoming the information barriers for people.
Oh, it's so key. It's so key. One of the things that we've done with our campaign as so not to make it just a pamphlet push card kind of campaign, we've created even, I have this with me, a community card. And the community card is addressing what we say is information injustice, that people lack resources and opportunities when they lack information. And certainly in a place like Allston-Brighton, where there are so many people who we categorize them as transient and not as engaged in local politics or local civic engagement and community affairs, a lot of times when we interact with people, like now, I ask people, do they know what the city council is? And they say they don't even know what the city council is in the first place. And so as we begin to talk about things like affordable housing and public transportation and education, I think that it is most impactful and effective that we also make sure that we make people aware of some of the key roles of the city council, connecting you to city services and information, voicing your opinion and your perspectives, as well as passing and amending local laws and approving the city's budget every single year. And so we want to make more people aware of that because we believe that the more empowered people are about what the city council is, they can take more advantage and access those resources more readily as well.
This is BNN News. We're talking with Jonathan Allen, candidate for City Council in District 9. Jonathan, I'm sure you've heard from people in Allston-Brighton that they're worried about housing, especially if they're not a homeowner, or maybe if they are an owner, they worry about taxes too. But as far as the renters especially, how would you like to help them as a counselor?
Yeah, I think as we think about home ownership, we have to first expose our constituents to some of the resources that are already available in our community. For example, the Allston-Brighton Community Development Corporation provides home ownership classes to constituents, to residents. I was talking to a neighbor the other day who did not even know that. And so making them more aware of what's already readily available to them. In addition to, I think that developers certainly who contribute to the Community Preservation Fund, that we ought to be advocating for more of those funds to go toward community development corporations. These are nonprofits that's focus is affordable housing. And I think that they have a wealth of knowledge and systems in place for advancing the mission of affordable housing, that if we continue to work with them and fund them more, we can expand more home ownership opportunities.
You ride the Green Line a lot. I'm sure you get a good
Yes.
view of bicyclists on Comm Ave, but any ideas about making transportation work better for people in the
I think
district?
certainly that public transportation infrastructure is critical, making it possible for bikes to be able to ride on our roads safely. People are trying to get to and fro. And when I think about public transportation, I do not think about it apart from the very real threat of climate change, that we have to, even according to the City of Boston's Climate Action Plan, we have to reduce carbon emissions if we're going to take seriously making sure that we're creating more sustainable solutions to preserve our world and our space. And so that includes making sure that we have more bike lanes, more bus lanes, so that we can increase ridership on buses as well. And that must be a priority. And we must create more opportunities, even like light rail. And that's a conversation around the rail that would extend into Boston Landing as well as into West Station. These are the conversations that are necessary. And again, for me, a thread of all of this is making sure at the same time we're making people aware of resources and ways to participate in more sustainable living. There are many members in our community who may come from lower education backgrounds as well as maybe lower socioeconomic backgrounds, that their ability to access information on how to implement recycling even in their own homes, there's a gap in that. So we have to make information more accessible, more understandable, so that everyday people, no matter what your educational level or social background, that you're able to participate in preserving our world and pushing us forward.
What about schools in this district? I know there are a lot of families maybe who don't send children to public schools, but I'm sure there are others who really rely on the system.
Yeah.
What would you like to do for them?
We have to advocate for more funding for our public schools. It's absolutely critical that our relationship building, coalition building, both with organizations that are addressing the adequate resources that are in our public schools, as well as our state house, our governor, building those relationships to further the mission toward expanding funding. And that is even remodeling what our current state formula is, that calculates how much money is going to our various districts. In a place like Boston, where we're funding a significant amount of our public schools ourselves and not taking as much money from the state, we have to continue to advocate that more money from the state be allocated to Boston's public schools. In addition to the mere fact that we have to expand social emotional intelligence in our schools so that our kids, our young people are able to truly navigate the world when they leave K through 12, and certainly expanding access to pre-K for all of our residents, regardless of their socioeconomic background, so that children are getting access to early education and done so in an equitable way. Our teachers are expending so much energy, many of them their own resources, trying to provide equitable education, adequate education for our children, and oftentimes it's not enough. It's not enough when we think about our children who are learning English for the first time versus our children who need additional accommodations to be able to learn, as well as kids who, when they go home, don't have the necessary resources to eat and to even sustain their daily livelihood. All of it is interconnected, and so that's why we have to support initiatives that are comprehensive, both equitably, and that have cultural competency, so that we can truly make sure that we're addressing the issues across the board, across the diverse backgrounds of our public school system.
This district is bordered by at least 2 universities.
Yes.
BU reportedly gives the city more money than most in lieu of taxes. But overall, should this district be getting more from institutions, including Harvard, of course?
Absolutely. I think that we should be meeting 100% of what is requested in terms of pilot payments. And that's something that I want to continue to advocate. And I believe that even as a Boston University alum, that I will continue to be able to foster and build relationships with Boston University and the other universities, hopefully to really impress upon them the need to strengthen and pour more resources into our communities. And I think that we can use funds like Pilot to earmark more opportunity into public education in our local schools, as well as other priorities around green space and parks and recreations in our communities as well.
As you probably picked up from some of the forums and some of your own talks with people in the neighborhood, people sense that there's change going on in this district and they're worried about it. And there's one element of the local flavor, I think, the creative population in this district, the artists. There's worry about them being squeezed out. What would you like to do about that?
I think that the creative population is experiencing what a lot of people who don't have a safety net are experiencing in terms of being able to afford to live in our district. I think that we ought to have more mixed-use developments and mixed-income developments so that people like our artist community can be able to find housing that they can afford. I mean, there are developments happening already in Austin where they're getting creative with the type of space that they create, where there may be 4 rooms and some shared space around amenities. And those are some of the creative approaches that people are getting into to ensure that we're addressing the various communities and populations that are in Allston-Brighton. And knowing a place like Austin, whose historical roots were autistic in that way. And we have to make sure that we hold on to that and continue to preserve and value those people in our community who are artists and who are creators and inventors and entrepreneurs and really trying to chase their dreams.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Jonathan Allen, candidate for City Council in District 9, that's in Allston-Brighton.